Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to Big Mike Sports. We are Atlanta born, Carolina raised, and Detroit driven. I'm your host, as always, Big Mike.
The one and only. I'm back!
Going over a few top 25 college football results from Saturday, and our top story being that kind of thin margin of victory for number one Georgia against Auburn. Only 27 to 20 in the victory at Auburn on the road. And I can't help but wonder whether this is truly the number one team in the country, the favorite for the national title or not. Because from what I've seen in their play against SEC competition, haven't been too impressed so far. They've been either tied or down in the first half of both of those games with South Carolina and Auburn. They were able to rally at the very end to come out on top, but I'm just not exactly sure how many more times they'll be able to do that or be able to continue to do that against some of the bigger competition. Teams like Michigan with their tough defense, they're not going to let you come back in the second half unless they have something to say about it. So a game like that would keep it tight. And you would kind of like Michigan's experience on offense. They still got McCarthy out there. Definitely pick him over Carson Beck at this point. And then other teams like Texas and Ohio State and even Florida State, those are some teams that can really get out in front of you early. So if you let the game get too out of reach in the first half, it wouldn't really be all that easy to come back on the strength of Carson Beck like that. And even a team like Washington or Oregon or even USC, maybe even Notre Dame, if they were able to get up that far, those are teams that are able to get out to leads pretty early with their explosive offenses. So Georgia's got number 20 Kentucky in their next game. The team that just beat Florida in pretty convincing fashion. That will be at the Hedges, however. So maybe they'll be able to look a little better in this upcoming matchup against Kentucky. Even more of a quality opponent. Maybe they'll be able to stack some wins and kind of get into the flow of the game a little more. But you got to think that they're going to be really raring to come out in the first half really strong and try and get out to a big lead because, Kentucky's one of those teams that can play some pretty good defense too. Under Mark Stoops, they've had some really good defenses, so that'll be another tough test for them. And then other than that, maybe Ole Miss on November 11th. That could maybe be their biggest test of the year. Super explosive offense in Ole Miss. Can't let Ole Miss get in front of you early if you're Georgia. The Ole Miss offense is good the whole game, really. The only question is their defense. So maybe they would make Carson Beck look really good on defense and it turn into sort of a high scoring game. Obviously, Ole Miss has not faced a defense as good as Georgia, so that's obviously going to take some away there. But yeah, really interested to watch that game as Georgia goes into the back end of the schedule and moves on towards the playoff.
Yeah!
And if the season ended today, you're looking at Georgia Ohio State as that 1-4 matchup. And you know that Ohio State would give them as much as they could handle, uh, looking for revenge after losing what they thought was a game that they should have won last year in the playoff. Of course, Ohio State has some questions at quarterback of their own, with McCord kind of trying to come into his own. But yeah, that would be a huge matchup that I would be really interested to see. And then also Michigan Texas at 2-3. Maybe Michigan would finally be able to win a playoff game and get to the national championship game like they thought they should have last year. And hopefully it'll be a better game this year than it was last year if Michigan and Georgia could get in there, or even if Michigan Ohio State got in there, that would be absolutely unprecedented. I feel like the NCAA and all the sports networks would really love that one to have Michigan Ohio State for the title. I can't even imagine like the hype that that game would receive. That would be a riveting matchup to the very end. So, but still a lot of the season left to go, and you know that Florida State, who is currently on the outside looking in the AP top 25 at number 5, they really think that they have a shot to be able to get in there and have a chance at winning it all. Not a whole lot of like super quality wins besides that dominant win over LSU first game of the year, but we've seen enough from LSU right now to know that they're not one of those top teams. So I feel like that win's kind of getting a little less quality as we go along. And then, if you're only beating Clemson by 7 points and Boston College by 2 points, I know that you're in Death Valley and Clemson really had a lot to play for, and so it's a really tough matchup there. But yeah, you kind of want to go into that game getting a little bit more convincing victory, especially coming off of that 2-point win at Boston College, which, letting them get back into the game in the first place is kind of a mess of its own. But you're at home against Virginia Tech, have a big home stand actually, finishing off with number 19 Duke at home, and then you play Miami also at home. You really, if you're Florida State, you really want to make those games super, super convincing. Like, leave no doubt left out on the field. Like, you want to get 40 to 20, something like that in those games to really show that you're the dominant team in the ACC and really show that you can, mop up any competition that you face. Because if those games, if they continue to play them really close, it's not going to look very good for them. Like, other teams are going to have much more impressive resumes than they would. So you're really hoping for some big, big blowouts in those games to really prove it. Duke kind of reeling right now after that loss against Notre Dame, kind of on an emotional low. You're losing your quarterback. Still unclear how long Leonard will be out for, but coming off that loss at home against a big opponent, you had College Game Day in town, and to lose that game the way that they did and have their quarterback go down as well, not a good look for Duke. So hopefully Duke will be able to stay afloat a little bit so that it would at least be a quality win for Florida State if Florida State is able to pull that off. And then Miami, they'll definitely want Miami to keep going as well. So yeah, the ACC is in Florida State's hands right now, but also coming up in the ACC, you got Louisville, who's remaining undefeated somehow. They're still holding on out there. Really interesting year for the ACC this year. And then, of course, North Carolina is really trying to go for the ACC championship. And that's still our pick for the ACC championship game. We want to see Florida State versus North Carolina. Florida State would probably still come out on top there. And who knows if they would be able to make the playoff even with the ACC championship. Of course, either Michigan or Ohio State will have to lose to one another. So maybe that would drop one of them out. But I'm not sure, though. Maybe a one-loss Michigan or Ohio State, their only loss being to either one, would still make it into the playoff. We've seen crazier things before, but still a wide open race, still a lot of teams competing. We haven't even talked about Penn State here. If Penn State could rattle off some big wins in the Big Ten, they play Ohio State the 21st, so if they could win that game before we even get to Michigan, Ohio State, that would be big for them, and that would put Penn State right in the playoff. Penn State's been rattling off some really impressive wins. They have not played in a very close game yet. They took care of Iowa in really, really huge fashion, 31-0. Of course, we know that Iowa can't play offense, but still very impressive win, being able to shut them down. And, Iowa plays really good defense. So being able to put up 31 on them like that is really impressive. And then they took care of Northwestern in Chicago. Not the biggest surprise, Northwestern's not a very good team, but still, it's better than Florida State's been doing. Let's just say that, not playing down to their competition. So yeah, Penn State's still very much in the running. Then you got one of the Pac-12 teams, such as Washington, Oregon, USC. They're all still in there. Of course, they're probably going to end up at least cannibalizing a few of them. The 14th, Washington will play Oregon, and at USC. Yeah, just a huge round robin for the Pac-12 basically coming up, because you got teams like Oregon State still hanging in there. They had that big win over Utah. Didn't think they would do it. I thought that Utah would play a lot more competitive, but still a great win for Oregon State there at home. Then Washington State still hanging in there. We love Wazoo. We love it when Wazoo is competitive. So yeah, Pac-12. Could this be the year that they finally get another team in the playoff? I don't think they've had one since back when Oregon was competing for national championships on a regular basis. So the swan song for the Pac-12, still very much a storyline and still very much a possibility for making the playoff, especially if something crazy happens like Michigan and Ohio State both lose, or perhaps Texas loses, or, maybe somewhere down the line Georgia ends up losing. I mean, not really expecting it necessarily, but like we said, Ole Miss, they could give Georgia quite the game there. Of course, it would be at home for Georgia, so it would take something super special for Ole Miss to be able to beat Georgia at the Hedges. But crazier things have happened. Can't count Lane Kiffin out, I guess.
To this day!
And of course, if we're talking Pac 12 football, we of course have to mention that 48-41 loss for Colorado, or, 48-41 win for USC. Um, this was one that I was talking about where I was hoping that at least Colorado would, be competitive in this one after being humbled pretty badly against Oregon. And Colorado did make it a game at the end. They had a chance to tie it up at the very end, but that Colorado defense still very suspect. Not really able to stop anybody, especially not Caleb Williams. It went for 403 yards, 6 touchdowns. Caleb Williams somehow improving on his Heisman season from last year, doing even better this year. So it's very much possible that Caleb Williams could go for back-to-back Heisman's here. And he's also talking about staying in college for next season as well, being able to get a lot of NIL money. So I wonder if he stays next year as well, if he'll be able to continue that kind of production. I guess he's not really concerned about being too highly drafted. I mean, if he doesn't do very well next season after coming back and he ends up being like a low first round pick or maybe even like a second or third round pick, who knows? But yeah, that could be interesting to kind of forsake your NFL career for being one of the most special college players to ever play. So yeah, it'll be interesting to follow him. And then, not to be outdone, we have Jaden Daniels' performance against Ole Miss and that just back and forth shootout. Jaden Daniels for LSU ended up with 414 yards, 4 touchdowns, but it was not enough as Ole Miss came out on top 55 to 49. This game was absolutely insane. 31-28 at halftime. Felt like we were playing two games in one. But yeah, that's just a lot of fun when you see Ole Miss get into a shootout like that against a really good offense like LSU has. Um, Really makes you wonder what's like. Is it the defense that's the problem with LSU? Because yeah, they've given up a lot of points, but they're obviously a pretty competitive team with that offense. So maybe they'll be able to um, get into a decent bowl game against a good opponent at the end of the year and be able to give themselves some momentum for next year. Yeah, people thought that it was going to be their season this year. I mean, I thought they had a pretty good chance, but apparently not. SEC tough as always, especially nowadays in the days of the super offense SEC. Alabama not really up there in offense anymore since they're kind of back to where they were with Jalen Hurts, with Milroe out there kind of managing the game and being a threat on the ground. Um, and then Tennessee beating South Carolina, still putting up a lot of points on offense, but Joe Milton threw a couple interceptions in that game. Um, Maybe it's not the year for him to completely, blow everybody out of the water, but still a good quarterback. And then Kentucky beating Florida in Kentucky. Florida just kind of a hapless team. Like, of course, they were able to get back into the polls this past week, but we never really liked Florida. They don't seem to be super well coached or very motivated in the first place. Then Graham Mertz never really believed in him as the quarterback there. And that rush defense for Florida gave up 280 yards to the Kentucky running back, 26 carries for Davis, and 3 touchdowns as well. Yeah, I don't know what to say about Florida other than this regime doesn't seem to have what it takes to really bring them back up. I think that their ranking this week was kind of a pity party. They'll be back down to where they were um, the rest of the season and probably end up like 6-6, 5-7, kind of where they've been the past couple years. They may give somebody a scare, like in Georgia, Florida. Maybe they'll be able to play up to Georgia a little bit and keep it a close game in the first half, in the kind of game that Georgia has been liking to play the first few weeks of the season. Yeah, anything's possible in this SEC. I mean, Kentucky's undefeated right now. That matchup against Georgia will be really big for them. And yeah, teams like Ole Miss still hanging in there, being able to put up a lot of points. Then Alabama's still going to be there. We'll see if they can hold on to that one loss and keep it clean the rest of the way. Mississippi State not really able to do very much against them, which they never do. Will Rogers, the Mississippi State quarterback, was able to throw his first career touchdown pass against Alabama in that game. I think he's played them like 4 times. And he has something like 10 interceptions, and that was his first ever touchdown against that team. So, yeah, take your moral victories, I guess.
As there's a drive in a deep left field by Castellanos.
Let's go ahead and get our college football homerism out of the way. Georgia Tech against Bowling Green, losing outright after going up 14-0 in the first quarter. It was all Bowling Green after that. Bowling Green winning outright by 11 points after being, I think it was a 22.5 point underdog against Georgia Tech. Yeah, not looking good. Not looking good for Georgia Tech. Then App State grinding out a 41-40 win at the buzzer against UL Monroe of all teams. The Warhawks have been pretty competitive this year. I think it's mainly just they've been playing pretty good defense. I remember they had that 17-13 win over Army to start their season. But yeah, if you haven't seen a replay of the ending of the App State UL Monroe game, it's pretty insane ending. Kicker Michael Hughes able to win it for App State at the buzzer. Um, UL Monroe had the ball on the App State 2 yard line at the very end of the fourth quarter, fourth and goal, but a big goal line stand from App State was able to keep the game from getting out of hand late because a touchdown there by the ULM would have made it, I think, a 10-point game at that point, really put it out of reach. So really gritty victory for App State there, and that's just the kind of thing that they're going to need to win games this year. I mean, it's been kind of a weird year for them already. They got a game against Coastal, I think, is their next game coming up, but Coastal's reeling as well, not really looking like themselves after their coach Chadwell left for Liberty. So yeah, hopefully App State will be able to string some wins together and remain competitive in the Sun Belt. But yeah, it seems like they're maybe a year or two away from really returning to where they were at in like 2018, 2019, where you're consistently at the very top. But Aguilar looks pretty good for a freshman right now, and another year or two under his belt, I think he'll be a really good quarterback for App State by the time it's all said and done. Now, you know what? Let's go ahead and mention that elephant in the room right now, and that is that Monday Night Football game last night. Seahawks cruising to a 24-3 victory over the Giants at MetLife Stadium in New York. Just an awful showing from New York. Daniel Jones, what a pity. What a pity it is. I mean, he's getting paid like thousands of dollars for every yard that he gains at this point. He's got to lead the league in turnovers at this point. I think he had at least three of them last night, maybe four. He had the two picks and at least one fumble, unless he got a second fumble. I can't exactly remember, but yeah, Daniel Jones leading the team in rushing. Matt Breida, the running back, leading the team in receiving. They just couldn't do anything. Every single pass was short, and every single time Daniel Jones threw the ball 10 plus yards down the field, it was intercepted. So yeah, really making it easy for the Seahawks on defense there. Seahawks offense didn't even have to do very much to get the easy victory. Geno Smith only 110 yards passing. Kenneth Walker 79 yards rushing, one touchdown. And over half of the receiving yards on the team went to tight end Noah Fant on two receptions for 63 yards. Now the Seahawks defense got like 10 sacks, just a totally ridiculous amount. Yeah, the paper bags were coming out by the end of the game. They're in MetLife Stadium for the Giants, and I don't really know what you do at this point. I mean, you're lucky to have that one win, and it came against one of the worst teams in the NFL. So, yeah, this could be a year of great change for the Giants if they're not able to put something together. Yeah, it was just a lot of magic last year, and I guess it's completely worn off now. I knew that they were going to have some sort of blowback for this year, that last year they overachieved, but I didn't think it would be this bad. It's kind of the same thing with the Vikings. Didn't think that it would be this awful early. But yeah, Giants one of the worst teams in the NFL right now, and it's not looking like it's going to get better anytime soon. I mean, the defense did what it could. This could have been a super huge blowout, especially with how many turnovers Daniel Jones had. But they only lose by 21. They were able to keep the numbers for the Seahawks offense pretty low. So you like what you see from the defense there, but eventually there's only so much that the defense can do. Like their back's gonna get broken eventually when you put them on the field so many times, and they're fighting to keep the Seahawks out of the end zone, but in the end, for what? If your offense can't do anything to put their own points on the board. Only 46 points for the Giants in 4 games. That is like, you know, not even 10.5, I don't think. And you're giving up 122. Um, yeah, that's not good no matter who you are. Arizona sitting at 1-3 as well. Only a minus 14 point differential though, to kind of put it in perspective. So yeah, the Giants not competitive at all, and I really wonder how the season's going to end up for them because yeah, they're going to have to change quarterbacks. Like I don't know if they're going to get rid of Dayball. I don't think so. I think well, you just signed Daniel Jones to the huge contract as well. So yeah, they're locked in with this. It's not even mediocrity. It's just terrible, and it is just terrible right now. So yeah, I really hope that they are able to put something together because this could get really bad really quickly. Then last but not least, the MLB postseason began today with the wild card games getting set, and the Rangers with an early win against the Rays in Game One. Twins being the Blue Jays right now. Got Diamondbacks Brewers at 7, and then the big one that we're looking at is Marlins and Phillies. I'm pretty sure the winner of that series will end up playing the Braves as the Braves go and try for another World Series. The Braves line up second only to the Murderers Row Yankees right now in terms of slugging and just so I think runs created, one of those, sabermetric stats or whatever. So really good chance for the Braves to be able to make a run at another title. Hopefully the Phillies or the Marlins won't upset them. I think it was the Phillies who upset them last year on their way to a World Series run of their own. So really excited for this postseason. It's looking to be really exciting, and yeah, the rest of October is probably going to get pretty wild as it always does. I love watching the World Series. It's very thrilling stuff. A lot of tension. Everything riding on one crack of the bat. We love it. But even better when the Braves get there and are competing for the title as well. So we'll see just what the future holds in that regard. And we'll see you guys next time.